The purpose of this episode is to describe Big Amy, Small Hippo. They happen for a reason. There's nothing wrong with you if you feel that way, and we can change it. We can treat it. You can feel better. Before we get into the meat of what this series is all about in terms of anxiety and depression, I need to lay out a couple of foundations for you. One is the whole idea of Big Amy and Small Hippo, which I'm going to talk about in this episode. And the next episode are primary emotions. In Big Amy and Small Hippo, those are my nicknames for in the brain, in the limbic system, an enlarged amygdala, an overactive amygdala is what I call Big Amy. A small hippo is a smaller, atrophied, meaning it's shrunk, hippocampus. And both those things happen in the brain in response to toxic stress. Specifically, what the science tells us is that cortisol keeps squirting through the body when we're stressed or fearful. So we can run like hell or fight like hell if there's a wild animal wanting to hunt us down and eat us. You know, from 100,000 years ago, evolution actually, from millions of years before that, but anyway, us living on the savannah in Africa 100,000 years ago, that's what's going on. And it's still going on today. Something happens that causes us to feel fear, like a car almost hits us or someone starts yelling at us or whatever. The body, the mind and the body just happens like an orchestra. All those different parts playing to be able to respond to the threat. And one of those responses is a chemical called cortisol. But what happens is when we live with toxic stress or toxic fear, like in our homes, someone is yelling at us all the time. Just there's constant fear. You know, when my patients say, yeah, I'm like walking on eggshells, or I was walking on eggshells, that means for a long period of time, maybe more than a year, I don't really know, they're living in fear of whatever they are. They could be like, no one's yelling at them or something, but they're afraid they can't pay their bills over and over, just year after year. That's toxic stress. Feeling like you have to be perfect. The fear of not being perfect, like as a 16-year-old, you know, in your school, in your life, and on social media, that kind of fear can, after a while, that cortisol every day, cause Big Amy or Small Hippo. So whether it's physical violence or threats or eggshells or perfection, all these things can lead us as humans to experience that toxic stress, that toxic fear, constant bathing of the brain of cortisol. Now, cortisol bathes your body too, and that can have effects on bones and muscles and hearts and things. But right now with Big Amy, we're talking about, and Small Hippo, we're talking about an enlarged, overactive amygdala and an atrophied, shrunken hippocampus. So they're really key to this series because they explain the two major forms of psychiatric or psychological or mental health difficulty. One is generalized anxiety disorder, the most common disorder that humans experience, as well as a type of major depression. So real quickly, Big Amy means that cortisol has bathed the brain over and over and over again. The amygdala actually gets bigger and bigger and bigger to respond to its environment. There's nothing wrong with you if that happens. I know it's mind-boggling to believe it, but there's nothing wrong with you if your amygdala grows, because in fact there is science I've read that the amygdala had to grow in our environment, like on the savannah or before that, in order to deal with the threat. So I call it too many lions on the savannah. So if there's lots of lions on the savannah circling you every day wanting to eat you, you feel fear every day, right? And so because you feel fear every day, you have to be really on guard. Because if you're not on guard, you could be eaten. So the amygdala in response grew to make that human really on guard. So instead of like, oh, was that a stick that broke over there? It'd be like, stick, broke. You just want to be totally on guard so you're not eaten. So a Big Amy is a normal response, believe it or not, to your environment. The problem is, we call it generalized anxiety disorder because it's awful to live with. It's just like you're in fear all the time. And so compared to situational anxiety, which is a situation is you don't like public speaking, it just totally freaks you out, you're afraid. Generalized anxiety is it's on all the time. You feel fear response, or what I call the fear response, or anxiety or something, fear. You go out to the grocery store, you're driving, you're in class, you're at work. It's just always on. It's because you got a big Amy going on. Now, we can treat that. We can shrink a big Amy. There are three things. There's love, loving relationships. There's change of your environment or change of what's going on in your belief system, or serotonin, the medication, this SSRI thing, the antidepressant thing. It's serotonin. Science tells us and shows us, and I've seen it happen in my practice here in my office like so many times. Serotonin shrinks big Amy and the person no longer feels generalized anxiety. It is great. The other one is small hippo. So big Amy happens frequently, like a lot. And small hippo, I don't see very much, but it does happen. So again, with constant stress, toxic stress, constant fear, like every day for whatever cause, cortisol also, it makes the amygdala bigger, but it shrinks the hippocampus. This is all in the brain, in sort of the middle of the brain, in the limbic system. And so it shrinks it, and as it shrinks it, one research article called it stress system blunting. I would just say it's emotional system blunting, because what happens is people don't feel anything anymore. And I think the brain does this in order to stop feeling so freaked out like by big Amy all the time. I'm really not sure, but science does tell us that toxic stress or cortisol shrinks the hippocampus, and it prevents neurogenesis in the hippocampus, which is new neurons from being born, generated, and populating the hippocampus. So when the hippocampus shrinks, it's hard to remember things, it's hard to learn new things, it's kind of hard to stay focused because the hippocampus is part of all that. But moreover, you just feel flat. And if the hippocampus is really shrunk, a person doesn't feel anything. They don't even feel depressed. They look depressed because they're flat, like the face is flat. But they're not even depressed. They don't feel depressed, don't feel anxious, don't feel happy, don't feel anything. So again, the treatment is serotonin. If I see someone come in here with a big Amy, I say, please talk to your doctor about serotonin medication. Or small hippo, I say, please talk to your doctor about serotonin medication. Those two diagnoses, those two experiences benefit by serotonin or SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, called antidepressants typically, because the science tells us that they do, and in my practice, I see it all the time. After a month or two with serotonin, people feel either smaller Amy, I feel calmer, or bigger hippo, you know what, I kind of feel stuff again, I kind of feel good. That medication works under those two situations of big Amy or small hippo. I'm not sure it really helps with situational anxiety or situational depression. Situations need to change. But anyway, the purpose of this episode is to describe big Amy, small hippo. They happen for a reason. There's nothing wrong with you if you feel that way, and we can change it. We can treat it. You can feel better. So I hope this has been helpful because you deserve it and you are awesome.